All right. So, welcome once again, everyone, and kindly go ahead and you can share what you're expecting within the session, and then we could move ahead from there. And so, interestingly, I started building out this slide somewhere around September. Okay, no, the start of October, and that's when I was actually putting the slide together. So I have about 4 sessions for this year's conference. And this was more or less like the first one that I started building out on. Interestingly, I actually got to finish building that out somewhere around yesterday. No, actually today was when I actually got to round up on that because I mean there was so much to do in there, but I'm so glad to be able to share with you. I mean these few things as we go along. I was speaking with a friend, and the one thought was that this particular section, I mean in itself, might seem so advanced. Okay, so I sort of have toned down on a number of things. Okay, just give us an overview of what can be done. But aside that, just give a brief overview of what you talk about when you say working with Python. Okay, as a programming language, and for those of us who want to, let's say, learn from that, I hope you'd be able to take that up sometime. And I'm sure to recommend a couple of books. I'd wanted to put those down, but I wasn't able to add them as of yet. So I'll just type them out for you once we are done with the session. Okay, so that's that. So welcome, and let me just do a brief introduction of myself. I know I've talked so much, but I'm Emmanuel and Emmanuel Mingle. I'm a cloud consultant, and then I'm a lead trainer with Ghana Code Club. And as a cloud consultant, I'm more concerned with cloud in itself, and then cloud security and then security. Okay, so these three, so the two, cloud and security, and then the intersection of the two, cloud and then security. And aside that, I'm also interested in DevOps as well, and then the intersection of DevOps and then security. So with everything I do, I'm sort of interested in the sides of security as part of that. So that's a brief about myself. And then I'm a lead trainer with Ghana Code Club, where we actually get people started off in terms of computational thinking and then programming and all of that, especially like children. So between the ages of about 5 to 14, 18, that's what we do. But of course, I mean, those who are above that, we tend to bring them in the fold as well. But that's just a brief about myself. And today we are talking about building a bulk SMS solution using Python. Okay. And we'll see where we go from there. Now, a few things, housekeeping rules. So there's the chat session, and then there's the question and answer session. So if you have a question, you can just go ahead and then share that within the chat and within the Q&A, or you can put that within the chat as well. As we go along, if I see any questions, I'll just be able to respond to them as and when possible. Okay, so just feel free to ask. And of course, you can raise your hand at some point in time. I could be able to open the mic for you to also be able to speak. Now, with the code that I'll be using, the code base, I actually have that on my GitHub. So I'll share that at the end of the session also. If I don't remember to do that, just please remind me. And then there's a particular tutorial. So the maintainer of the package that I'm using actually for this actually has a blog on that as well. So you can also check that out. It's pretty straightforward, for which you can work with. All right. Okay, great. So let's get started. So we'll just get started with the introduction to Python. Okay, I mean, what Python? Now, if we say Python, I'm sure some people might think it's just to do with the snake Python, but it's not just about the snake. And so let me skip this for now. Now, let's talk about the history of Python. So I just got this off Wikipedia. And interestingly, I think in my days in SHS was when I was actually introduced to Python, but I did not get to use it extensively. I just was introduced to that Monte Carlo Python. I think, yeah, that's like Monty Python's Flying Circus. Okay, that's when I was introduced to Python and then what it was actually used for. It was later in SHS, no, university, when I actually got to use Python quite extensively. But Python is not like my mainstay language for the most times. My mainstay language is actually PHP for the most part. But I'm actually looking to jump into Django at some point, but that's just for the side. But Python was actually conceived in 1980, but initially came out in 1989 by Guido van Rossum, who is actually a Netherlands. How do you call it? He's actually from Netherlands, yes. And he named it after a show that he watched on TV, BBC TV. That's the monthly Python Flying Circuit. So that's how it actually got the name. Okay, so that's how he actually envisioned it. All right. And I mean, during that time, there are many programming languages, but I mean, he created that to sort of add to that and then solve some of the issues that were in vogue during that time with other programming languages. I'm not necessarily going to discuss, let's say, these problems and then how they actually are now. But I mean, you could actually go ahead and then build your own programming language if you are up to that. It's all about how you want it to be, and it's actually something that if you want to do, it's possible to do. All right, great. Now the next point we'd actually be looking at is so what's Python? So aside the history of Python, so Python is actually a general purpose language. When we say general purpose, it means that you can use it for a variety of things. We'll actually see a number of that as we go along, but you can use it for data science, machine learning, you can use it for web development, you can use it for game development, you can use it for scripting, bash scripting, or not bash scripting, like Python scripting, yeah. So system admin tasks, you can actually use Python to actually do that. Okay, so that's what you have when it comes to Python, and it can run on any system. So if you are using a Linux system, if you are using a Mac system, if you are using a Windows system, you can still be able to use Python, and then you'll be good to go from there. All right, now let's go back to a chat. So there was this chat. Okay, this was actually I actually got this chart from how do you call it? From the PyPL index. Okay. And this is the analysis of like the top 10 languages that are used among developers. And they pit that against the Stack Overflow developer survey in 2022. All right. Now, so if you look at number one and then number four, you find Python there. Okay. So number one for the PyPL index. Okay. Now, if you look at the name PyPL, that's definitely to reference that it's actually a Python related something, so PyPL. Okay, so definitely that would be a biased something if you ask me. But that's number one here. And then if you look at Stack Overflow, so Stack Overflow is more like a forum where you have different developers come in and then they share in terms of like if you have some issues, you can actually go ahead and then ask from there. Okay, so it's actually free place where you can actually go ahead and then ask questions. So if you are going ahead and then, I mean, if you start off your developer journey and then you have some issues or some errors that you need some help with, I mean, Stack Overflow could be the best place to look at. So ideally, when you are asking in such forums, one of the things that's advised is that you could actually go ahead and then search if someone has already asked that question that you asked or that question that you're looking for a solution for. If there's no solution for that, then you could go ahead and then ask. That's one general rule, I mean, that you could follow. So if you are looking for an answer to a solution and then you're on any internet board, one of the things you could do is that you could just go ahead and then search through all of that. So you can search through the existing solutions and then see if someone has actually answered that question. If there's if there's nothing like that, or if there's no how do you call it? If there's no system like that, or there's no answer to that, then you can ask your question. So that's just one thing you should note of. So Stack Overflow put Python as the fourth most widely used programming language, or let's say common among those who actually responded to that particular how do you call it? That particular program or project. All right. So that's just one thing. Now let's go ahead. Yeah, so advantages of Python. Why do people actually use Python? So it's free and then open source. Now, this is actually true for most programming languages. So I don't know of any programming language. Okay, maybe there could be some, but I don't know of any programming language that you have to pay to use that programming language. I don't know, Swift, you don't pay to use it. It's a different, but most programming languages are actually free and then open source. And then Python is actually free and open source as well. And another thing is that it's easy to learn. Okay, so if you want to learn Python, it's one of the easiest languages to learn. Of course, you have to know about your indentation. That's one thing, but it's easy to learn. And then it's popular and then has an active community. So with the diagram that I showed, you'd see that for the most part, right, Python is very popular. So it's number one on the PyPL list, and then number four on the how do you call it? On the Stack Overflow developer survey. Okay, so it's very popular. And then once you learn Python, right, you open yourself up to so many jobs. Okay, so you increase the chance of probably getting some job, right? So that's one of the good things in there. I mean, literally every programming language you learn, there's a job market for that. But Python sort of opens you up for, let's say, a wider variety of jobs based on like how you go about your learning. And then the fifth one is that it's versatile in the sense that you can use it for so many things. Okay, I mean, I talked about it being you can use that for web development and all of that. We'd actually see some of the frameworks which you can use when it comes to development with Python. Okay, so these are some of the advantages that you can speak of when it comes to say using Python, for example. All right, great. And please, as we are going ahead, if you have any questions, just feel free to put that in the chat or the Q&A. All right, so that I could answer them as well as I go along. Okay. Okay. Next thing. So we're going to talk about the users. So we look at scripting. Okay, how we use Python for scripting, and then we look at web development. Okay, in terms of the frameworks that I use, we look at game development, and then we look at data analysis and then machine learning. Okay, that will be one thing, and then testing frameworks as well. Okay. All right. So for scripting, now, when we say script, I don't know how to describe scripting, but scripting are like more or less like very small programs, okay, that execute like some particular task. So you can have a script as you see here to solve a problem. So it can just be one script, you just input a number and then it sort of solves the problem for you. And Python is very good when it comes to scripting. So Python, and then we have Bash. Okay. In my previous session, I had a previous session earlier, and I was talking about automation too. Okay, Python, we had let's say built out automation tools, but Python and then Bash, I spoke about those also as well being helpful when you are automating stuff. And for anyone who is interested in automation, okay, I'm just putting a book title in the chat. I mean, it's part of the recommended books, but let me just put that here. I'll probably add that again later. It's a very interesting book. I don't know, I don't remember the author, but you can just check that out. Automating the boring stuff with Python. Okay, so you can do a lot of things with Python in that regard. Anyway, so you can use that for solving math problems. I mean, checking errors within files. Okay, so Python is actually able to interface directly or interface pretty easily with your system. So if you are using a Linux system or you are using a Windows system, you are able to now interact with the system, and then you can do some bit of system tasks. So you can check for errors and then duplicates within files. Okay, so errors within files, let's say you have a test file or something, and then some part of it is corrupted. I mean, Python can help you check out for all of those. And then you can use that to rename files as well and then convert files. So you can do a batch rename of files. Let's say you want to rename some files according to a specific order. I mean, programmatically, Python can actually be able to do that. And then you can actually do some bit of entering data into the Excel. Okay, you want to work with an Excel sheet or Excel document or file, for example, you can interact with that. Interestingly, with the solution that we'll be working with, would actually interact with that using the OpenE Excel. Okay, that's like how do you call it? A module in Python would actually use that as well. But I mean, there are different modules that you can actually go with as you go along. And then you can use that to send HTTP requests, which is also something we're actually using, I mean, in the solution that we want to do. And then you can use that to calculate exchange rates. I mean, these are more or less like some scripting uses. Okay, so I mean, when it comes to scripting, there are so many things. It's just about your mind and then what you want to actually achieve. So there are so many things. So you can download stuff, you can sort send, reply, test, and then emails, and then you can scrape data from the website. Now, scraping data is like you extracting some form of information. Okay, so let's say from a website or something. And for those who are into data analysis, they do a lot of data scraping, and then Python becomes like a go-to. Python R, and they become a go-to language for them when they are doing all these things. So I actually got I tried something with scraping data using NumPy, I think NumPy, and then there were some other frameworks, but those were very interesting. So just picking out some details and then arranging them. It gets very interesting. If you are interested, you could just look at that as well. On the internet, you could just have some very interesting things there. I actually found a tutorial one time, and it was like, let's say for FIFA, I think FIFA.com, you can just get the names of the players. Like you run through a couple of pages, you get the names of players, the nationalities, and like all the details, and then you just store them within another file. Okay, so all this information are stored on the website. You can just step through that with Python and then make that happen. That's like very interesting stuff for anyone who'd be interested. Now we'll go ahead and then look at the next use of Python, or the next things that you can look at. That's to do with the web development. So currently, I mean, there are many frameworks. Now, when we say a framework, it's how do you call it? A bundle of modules, okay, that you can use for accomplishing a task. Okay, so we have different frameworks. Most languages have frameworks. So in PHP, for example, I was using Symfony, or I use Symfony, and then I do some bit of Laravel. And I mean, there are other frameworks there. So all of these are all still formed, or they are based off that language in question. So they are based, these ones are based off Python, for example. And then using these languages, you are now able to build out a particular solution. So they add different components, they add different modules, and then they bundle it together. It's almost like you having a, let's say, how do you call it? A particular, I don't know how to put that, but you have, let's say, an association, right? And the association has some rules that they go by. Now, all these rules coming together become like the framework by which that association operates by. I mean, you can call it something else, but it becomes like the framework for which you operate. And that's the almost like the same thing. So you can have within the Django system, you have a framework that actually handles, let's say, pathway, okay? A module that handles pathway. And then you have another module that stores data or connects to databases. And then you have another module that displays web pages for users. Okay, so all of these things are parts and parcels of the framework. And then you add them together to be able to now have your website. Okay, so that's what we talk about frameworks. And so you have different ones like Django, sorry, and then Flask. So Django, Flask, CherryPy, Web2Py, and then Pyramid. I mean, there could be thousands and thousands of frameworks, because I mean, it's since the language is open, everyone can now get on board and then create some frameworks or create some rules or tools together for them to use. Okay, so these tools now come to be what they'll use to work with. Now, interestingly, Django and then Flask are some of the most common web development frameworks. So when it comes to web development, you can look out for Django or Flask. So anyone on the call who wants to even start with development, web development, okay, you could go with Django and then Flask. Of course, it's based off your preference. So what you prefer, that is what you use. I can't say that, okay, maybe just go with Django or go with Flask. I mean, based on your preference, it's easier to just experiment with these things and then see where or what you are comfortable with. Okay, so that's just the one thing. Right. Aside that, we have game development frameworks. I mean, these are not, let's say, built out engines like Unreal engines, but I mean, you can do some great things with these frameworks as well. So you have Pygame, Pyglet, Kiwi, Panda 3D, and then RenPy. And I mean, there are others as well. I think there's PyTorch. I think I'd not add that, but those are really great things to work with. And some of these are 2D frameworks, or they are just used for 2D stuff. There are some that can have extensive form in terms of like 3D and all of that. So you could just look at that and then see how that goes. All right. Aside that, you have data analysis and then machine learning. Now, these have become like very common and widely used. Okay, so I mean, I think for now, I could say, from my point of view, I would say that data analysis and then machine learning is one of the major uses or one of the major forms by which we use Python as a language. So if you are into data analytics and then, or you want to get into data analysis, right? Or I mean, anything to do with data analysis, like all the rules with data, you could actually look at Python, okay? And then these are like go-to frameworks that you could look at. So pandas, okay, pandas, matplot, we have the numpy I spoke about, we have the scipy. I mean, so with the sci, you'd actually notice that this has to do with like more or less scientific stuff. And then you have TensorFlow. Okay, TensorFlow is primarily related to machine learning and the PyTorch that I spoke about earlier. Okay, so all of these are things. Yeah, so PyTorch is actually for machine learning, right? Not for game development. But I mean, you can just integrate that as well if you are doing some form of game development. So let's say you are doing a game that involves some form of like learning, machine learning, or visual stuff, you could actually do that. So let's say maybe open vision related stuff, you could actually look ahead to PyTorch as well. So these are some of the frameworks, okay, that you can use and which are available. And there are others. I mean, these are just a listing of that. Now, the interesting thing with these frameworks is that the more common they are, the more you hear about them. But I mean, based on your research, you could have something that would suit or fit you more perfectly. Okay, so that would be something that you work. All right, but these are not just the go-to. There are others that you could just look at. But these are more or less like what we call introductory ones that you could work with. All right, great. So let's go ahead. The next one is for testing. So let's say quality assurance and then test. Someone who is more interested in, let's say, testing or like Q and then testing, right? These are some of the frameworks that are available when it comes to Python. I think Selenium is one of the widely known ones in different circles. Okay. And I think Selenium, yeah, Selenium is, yeah, so Selenium, that's like the widely known one. I think there was some others as well. I don't remember the names of it. But we have Selenium, we have Behave, we have unit test. Okay, interestingly, PHP also has like a unit test framework like that. So PHP unit test. We have PyTest, and then we have the robot framework. So all of these are frameworks that are used for testing. Now, these are for testing applications like quality assurance stuff. So you build an application, you want to make sure that, okay, it meets the standard, okay, that it should meet. So ideally, these become like the frameworks that we use. And don't forget, I mentioned that the frameworks are different tools that come together. So there will be some components of the framework that will be focused primarily on, let's say, user input. How do we sanitize that input? And is it sanitized at some point? Now, when I say sanitize, sorry, it means that you are actually going ahead to make sure that the user enters the right details, okay, or details that do not affect the system or affect the application in one point or the other. Okay. I'll try not to just go overboard, but I mean that's what you have for testing, right? So user input, let's say interaction with the various clicks and all of that, call to actions and all of those things, different buttons and modals and everything. So these frameworks just make sure that what these are done, and then they might have different tools that are bundled together to make that happen, or different, let's say, different dimensions or different aspects of the code that make it work. All right. So these are what we have in terms of the frameworks. Now, quickly, we just want to look at some companies that use Python currently. So these are quite a number of companies that use Python. And I would say that for the applications here, would actually know about 70% of them. Yeah, but probably you might actually know a lot of them. And then there are other sites also that use Python. Okay, so just imagine, I mean, if you apply yourself so well and then you learn this language, you actually have the opportunity to probably apply to these companies in the future. All right. So Google, with their TensorFlow, for example, Google actually uses TensorFlow a lot. I think they developed TensorFlow and it's actually based off the Python. Okay, so you learning that also gives you some form of advantage. And all of these also have different applications that they use or different dimensions they use Python within their system. Okay, all right. So we'll go ahead and our main focus for today I mean, the first part was just for introduction to at least help us, if not anything, if you don't pick anything, we just get a fair idea of what Python is. At this juncture, possibly before we go ahead, if anyone has a question, I would ask that you go ahead and then ask that question. So if anyone has a question, please just feel free. You can put that in the Q&A side of things, or you can go ahead and then raise your hand. So if you raise your hand, I can't be able to just unmute, allow you to speak. So um, anyone with any questions, yeah. I know I've spoken so much for like 20 something minutes. So any question, or we are all good. All right. So if you're all good, just please give a thumbs up in the chat for me to know that you are following, because we are getting into the more heavy lifting part. Okay. All right. Okay. I see a thumbs up somewhere. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Great. So I think we are all good then. Okay. Great. So we'll just go ahead and let me talk about a few things possibly. Okay, great, great, great. Software. Sebastian, I see your question. How much does the software cost? I don't know if you are referencing in terms of Python, but as we mentioned, Python is actually free. You don't have to pay for these for Python. And most of these frameworks are actually free. I mean, literally all of them are mostly free. So you can just go ahead and then you use them without paying for that. Okay, so it's actually free. You don't have to pay at any point in time to use any of these softwares. Okay. Okay, great. Now I wanted to, let's say, talk a bit about um, some concepts in Python, but I feel I'll probably talk about those when we get into the code. Okay, so I have the code already available. We'll not possibly, because of the time, we'll not write that out again. Okay, and then just to make it simpler, so we'll just run through the code maybe line by line, and then try and then understand what's happening there. If there's some concept related to Python being applied there, I mean, there are sort of concepts being applied there. So I'll probably try and then explain that as we go along. Okay. Now, for anyone who'll be learning Python at some point, these are the concepts that you get to interact with. So I'll just walk through that as much as possible before we get what we need to get done. Okay. All right. Great. So we are actually going to use the Emmanuel application on the phone. Okay, so I have that installed on my phone. I think at some point I'll probably just show you how it looks like on my phone, maybe share a bit of my phone for us to see. And then we'll get started for the, all right, great. Right, so that's the PyMO. That's what we use. Now, the Pi aspect of it is like the module. Okay, there's actually a module, not a framework. So you can have multiple modules forming a framework. Okay, so within Django, for example, PyTorch and all of that, it's multiple frameworks that are put together. But we'll be using the PyMO, how do you call it, module to work this out. Okay, and this is the link I was talking about. I think once you're done, I'll probably share that as well. That's by the developer. So this was the developer who actually created this module, okay, to make sure that what you can actually use the aspects of MO. Now, the one thing with the MO, okay, I think I'll do a demo of the MO application in terms of when you connect that to your desktop, but that's just on the side. But the main things we'll be using, we actually use an editor. Okay, we'll actually use VS Code in this case. Now, a text editor allows you to be able to edit whichever code that you are using. So if you are writing in Python, if you are writing in JavaScript, if you are writing in PHP, whichever language that you are using, right, you should be able to see some form of place that you can type in the code. And a lot of these editors actually are, how do you call it, intelligent enough to help you auto-complete your code and then write your code much easier. Because I mean, I think years ago, writing code would have been very hard because you don't have a tab to, you don't have tab to press so that you get the rest of the code done for you. But you have to now type out everything. But now it's pretty much simple and lots of things you can do in a few lines as well. So we use the VS Code, and then you need to have Python installed. So you can go to python3.org or python3.com, and then you download that, or just search Python download online, and then you can get that. Now, aside that, we use the PIP. Now, PIP is a package installer, okay, for Python. Automatically, when you install Python, most of the time you actually have that done for you automatically. If you are using Linux, let's say Ubuntu, for example, you may have to run the installation yourself, okay, but that will not be really anything difficult. Now, once you have the PIP installed, you need the OpenEXL. That's what I spoke about for the, how do you call it? For accessing the Excel file. So we were talking about how you can go ahead and then, send or interact with Excel files. So if you want to interact with Excel files, this is one of the modules that you can use. There are different modules that are available. So you can use any of those ones. And then you have to use the PIP to install the PyMO. I think once we get started with the demo itself, I'll probably go ahead and then show some bit of the code, okay, how to get all of these stuff. I want to do something now. Right. I want us to just look at the OpenXY and then the PyMO documentation. I've not opened that yet. Let me just do that. Okay. Okay. Let me just put that in the chat here for anyone who would be interested in that. Okay. Right. So the OpenSY is the Python library. Okay. And then it allows you to interact with Excel. Okay. So whichever Excel file that you have, you can actually be able to do that. And of course, they have different applications of this. I mean, if you are interested in that, you could just go through that, and then you'd find a few things in there. I think they have a couple of tutorials, and then they have tutorials here, which you can go through. And then they have some simple usage stuff. Okay, so I mean, if you have the time, you could just go through that. That's pretty huge. Myself, I just use a segment of that, so from the tutorial, so it doesn't. I've not really gone through that, but of course, there's so much to do here, or so much you can learn from within this place. Okay, and then we have the PyMO, which I spoke about, and this for connecting our Python system to the MO application. Okay, so the MO application is actually what helps us to actually now send out whatever we need to do. Okay, so just take note of that. And so you can check that out as well. I've put the links in the chat. Yes, and I think for anyone who would want to start off on Python 2, yes, documentation, yeah. So anyone who would want to start off on Python, you could check this out as well. That would be a good place to start. All right, great. So let's go ahead. Yeah, I think it's time for a demo. All right. So the interesting thing is that we may not, all of us will not have the time to actually install the system or install the application before we go ahead. So we'll just go ahead. I mean, the recording will be made available, okay, but I'll just try as much as possible to sort of start from the beginning. Let's say setting up everything. Okay, I've set those up already, but I'll just try and then run through all of those, and then we could just see how we go from there. Okay, but first off, I think the first thing I'll do will be to have that connected. All right. So I'll just show how the MO application looks like. Okay. I've already installed that. So I'll just go ahead. 137. And please, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask in the chat. Okay. And then we'll see. Okay. Right. Okay. So this is how this is actually from my phone. Okay, so this is actually for my phone. But once I start the tutorial itself, I may not be able to show this properly. Okay, but I mean we'll see how it goes from there. So this is the Airmo application, right? So I could just go ahead and open that. If I disconnect that, we can't see what exactly I'm doing. Okay, so I'll just maybe have that open. But from here, we are able to access quite a lot of things. And okay, no, this doesn't give us what we want. But okay, so from here, okay, it just connects to your phone and then is able to now run some certain tasks. So what we'll be doing is that we'll actually use this application, okay, to connect to the phone, and then we can actually go ahead and then send some messages. All right. Right. So you'd see from here, I'd sent out some sample messages, right? So this from welcome to ADSC 2022. Okay, so all of those messages are now shown from here. Okay, so you can see those showing from here. Okay, these are like sample messages. So whatever message you are sending within the Python application, right, it actually connects to our phone, and then through our phone is now able to send out the messages, right? So it's sort of like automated. So you could have a sheet available to you, and then you can send out those messages, or you can just type out one person's phone number, and then it will send out the message. Okay, so we can just get started in there. I'll stop my share for now, and then let me just disconnect from here. Sorry. Uh, okay. Let me just disconnect so that because the okay. So the connection is quite interesting because once you are connected on the web client, it means that you can actually be able to connect programmatically from what we'll be doing, like from the Python side. So ideally, I'll just disconnect that for now, but I just wanted to show you how the application looks like. So Airmo, you can just look for that. You might not find it on Google Play, so you can just set out from somewhere else, and then that'll be fine. Let me just stop my screen share, and then I'll start sharing my entire screen. Okay, wait, I think, right, let me just stop the share and then start the share again. So, right, this, 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 and that. So, all right, great. I think, yes. So, with regard to the code, okay, the code that we are going to be using, yeah, so that's that here. So ADSC here. Okay, let me just share the link. So for anyone who'd be interested in that, you could just go ahead and then open that as well. Okay, great. So that's the code environment. Now, I hope you can all see my test editor. Can you all see my test editor? The VS Code. Can we all see that? Hello? Okay, great, great. Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. Yes, okay. Thank you, Isaac, as well. So that's what we're working with. So we'll start off with just the simple SMS, and then we'll come to the bulk SM messages, right? But as I mentioned, I have the code already typed out. Okay, so we'll just walk through what it does. Now, if you go to the blog that I sent, let me see. Oh, I did not send that. Let me just send the blog address as well. Okay. All right. So that's from the developer. of, or the maintainer of this particular, actually it's now not under maintenance. So I mean, if anyone wants to take that up and then maintain that, that would be okay as well. Yeah. So if you go through the tutorial, right, they actually give a tutorial there. You could just follow that as well. Okay, that's the link I put in the chat. Right. Where are we? Okay, great. So I talked about trying to explain some concepts as we go along. So I'll just go ahead and then do that before we go ahead. Now, there are quite a number of things that you could do with Python, okay? And one of the things we have here is what important. So important allows you to pick some bit of information from one point and then just add that to your application. So let's say you have an already existing code base, and then you want to now feature that code to what you have. That's what you can use the import for. So you can just import. So in this case, we are importing IP version 4 address. Okay, that's for, let's say, routing. Okay, so that's for the communication or the networking side of things. I'm sure we saw in terms of the bash script usage or the scripting usages of Python, we saw how you can actually make some HTTP requests. So there's actually a module that actually handles HTTP requests. That's the IP version 4 address. So what we are doing is that we are now importing a subsection of that. Now, under any module, let me see if we can just view that. Okay, so this is like the module you have for that. Okay, like they actually put together in class. Okay, so you can just call this class the IP version 4 address. And then under that, we're actually looking for IP address, just IP address. Let me just search if I can find that. I think for the rest of the code, right, I'll try not to come here because it's actually confusing for me myself. I work with what I can work with, and then that's all. But under the module that we saw, the IP version 4, we just pick a segment of that. Okay, we just pick one part of that, which is the IP address. Now we can go ahead and then import all of the IP version 4 address. Okay, I don't know how to explain this. Okay, let's say you have a toolbox, right? And then you are going to, you are traveling, okay? And you know that when you travel, you'd actually use just one aspect of the toolbox. So let's say just the spanner within the toolbox. It's better to just pick that spanner from the toolbox rather than pick the whole box. And that's the same thing that we are doing here. Okay. So, okay. Right. I think I got that mixed up. So from the IP address, right, we are just picking out. So is the IP address we are picking from? Okay. Let's see this. Yes. So from the IP address module, we are just picking the IP address v4. Wait, did I get that right? Okay. IPv4. We're just picking the IPv4 address. Okay. Okay. IP. We are just picking that one. Let's say IPv4 address. Okay, so we are just picking this one. Okay, but you notice that there are other classes. So there's the IPv4 interface. Okay, and I'm sure there will be IPv6 as well. Okay, there's a class for that. Okay, yes. So IPv4 interface as well. So if the address we are connecting to is actually IPv6, then we can actually go ahead with that. But please don't worry about these things. These are not really important. Okay, but it's just like for us to get what we need to get done. Okay, but I'm just trying to explain that. So with the example I gave, so you just pick the spanner from the box. Okay, so from the IP address, we don't need IP version 6. We just need IP version 4. So that's the only thing that we pick from that. So we just import that and then add it to our code, or we add it to our luggage. Now we go to the PyMO, okay, what we are using, and then we just import the session because there are multiple sessions there, but all we need is the MO session, okay? And then aside that, within the services, right, there are multiple services. So let me see if that's still visible here. Okay, I don't have that here. All right. But when I opened the MO interface, right, there were multiple things that were there. So we had, let's say, SMS, we had photos and all of those things. Now, all of those are part of the services that are available, right? So within the services, you can have a photo service. You could have a different service altogether. Let me see if we can class services. Okay, it's not really show that, right? But within the service, right, you could have multiple services that you can actually look for. But then within the messaging service, we just pick the messaging service. And that makes sure that what we are able to now send whichever IP address and message that we want to send. Okay. Now, aside that, so that's for the concept of what modules in Python. Okay, so modules in Python. And then now we look at variables. Okay, so variables. Now, variables are, we have variables and then constants. Okay, now variables are placeholders where you now have like values that change over time. Okay, so then I don't know how if we should call this a variable or a constant, but variables change over time and then constants remain the same over time. A variable could be more or less like a cap where you put in some bit of information or some bit of the value and then you can use later. Okay, but variables change over time, constants remain the same. I'm not sure how we classify this. I think at this rate, we can classify this as a constant because it's just one particular address that would use there. Okay. And then the address is what would actually get the address from the MO application on our phone. So I don't know if you can actually see my screen. It's not possible to see that. But if you could see my screen within the MO application, right? There's the option of there's the option to get the IP, right? And it's that IP that I get that would actually be shown here. Okay, so whatever IP I need is actually from the MO application. So once I get that, so let me just write the correct one here, because if you get it wrong, you are not able to work that. So if you open the MO application on your phone or whichever, you go to the top right, there are three buttons there, and then you go to get more, get IP, and then you're able to see the IP address to connect with. So with that, it actually now connects to the phone because it connects to the phone. Now, for those of us who have used Zender before, it's almost like that same concept. So the phone actually has a particular, let's say, port and then the IP that they work with, and then you are able to connect from there. So once we get the IP as a, how do you call it, as a constant, right? Then we can now initiate a session. That's like initiate a connection to the phone. Okay. So based on the IP, you're able to make that session. And you see that this is MO session, and that's something that we imported based on what the request. The IP version 4 is also based on what the IP address module that we imported. So if we take out this particular module, it means that we cannot now what make a connection to the phone. Or if you take out the MO session, it means that we cannot now what create that session or initiate that session. Okay, so that's just one thing you should take note of. All right. And then once you have the session, we are good to go. Now, in some cases, let's say your ideally the port number that they use for these connections, okay, to the phone is actually a connection of it uses the port 233. Okay, so that's what we have here. Now, if you're not using the port 233, it's not able to make that connection for you. So based on whichever connection that you are using, if you are using a different connection, it means that you have to now add that particular port. So let's say 2334, then it means that you have to specify that as part of what you are doing. Okay, but in this case, it's actually a 233 here. Now that happens if that port is actually being used on your phone already. So let's say you have another application open, which is using a 233, then the application would actually shift to use a different port altogether. All right, so that's just one thing to take note of. All right, I'll just take a bit of a pause here. If anyone has a question, please just feel free to ask. As I mentioned, this is more like an extended form of more like an extended form in terms of the knowledge, okay? But I tried as much as possible to try and explain, okay? But once you get started in your lessons in Python, you can actually get going from there, then be able to go ahead. So if anyone has a question, just kindly feel free to ask in the chat. Yeah. Okay. It doesn't do that with a sender name. It actually sends it based on your phone number. Yes. So it uses your phone service. Okay. So it's more like it sends it on behalf of you. So it doesn't necessarily use the sender name. So if the person has your number saved, then that would be something that would show from there. Yes. At least with that, they can actually reply to you when needed. Yes. Okay. So thank you, Kweku, for the question. I don't know if anyone else has another question. All right. If there's none, we can just go ahead then. So we are done with the session, right? So we initiate the session. And then this is actually also, how do you call it? Another constant that we are using. Okay. A constant or a variable, whichever one we actually use. I'm still not sure. Okay. The value could change over time. So we could just call this a variable. Okay. Because if the user accepts the request, then we can go ahead. If the request is not accepted, then we can't actually go ahead from there. Okay, so that's just one of the things you should take note of. Okay, right. So if this particular request was accepted, then we store that within the variable. So it tells us here that what it could be a true or a false. We'd actually see that once we initiate that. So this particular information presents an output for us, which tells us that okay, this particular application or this particular message or request was actually denied. Okay, so we just print that out. Okay, if the request was accepted, and then it tells us what exactly that was. Okay, is the request accepted, true or false? Then it just shows that for us. Then once that is done, we can now go ahead and then create the messaging service. So you store the messaging service here. So we can just go ahead and then now initiate that particular message session. But we have to now do that based off what the connection we have to the phone. Okay. So we have that. And then we can now go ahead within the service and then send the message. Now, if we are sending a message, we have the number here and then the particular message. So let's change this to this is the ADSC 2022 Python session. Right. So I have this here. Okay. And then this is my number. I don't know. Could anyone who is okay with that, you could just go ahead and then type your number in the chat if you're okay with that. And then once you type that, maybe once we send that, it will probably come to your end. Okay. Thank you, Mubarak. So we can just put Mubarak's number here. 5419496. Okay, so we'll just test and see. Right, I think I missed that a bit. 7496. All right, so we have that here. Okay, so once we send that, we'll actually go ahead to Mubarak's place. Okay, all right. But before we go ahead, I think I was supposed to possibly show the setup, okay, because I'd already set up everything. I'm just changing my window now. Just confirm if you can see anything like Quapstars at Quapstars Easy. I don't know if you can see that. Can we see that? Are you able to see something like that? Okay, let me just do this. Let me just stop the share and then share my entire screen. Just give me a second. All right. So, okay. So I hope you can see my screen. So I'm sharing my entire screen now. Okay. Great. So as part of the slide, let me just go back to the slides and let me show something briefly. So some of the things we needed was what? The VS Code and then the Python. So these three things here. Okay. Now we have the Android version on our phone already. But these are the three things that are needed as well. So we have the Python PIP, we need the OpenXYL, and then the Python MO. Okay. Let me just, so if you go to the GitHub something that I sent, right? It tells you how to install the PyMO and then how to install the Open Excel. Okay, so those are things that are added already. So if if I had not installed that already, I could just go ahead and then pip install Open Py Excel. Okay. Now, once I do that, it actually goes ahead to install that for me. Okay. And then same for the PyMO module. Okay. So that actually goes ahead to install that for you. But because I've done that already, I don't need to install that. And just checking for my Python. Not this. Yeah. So if I type Python dash dash version, it tells me that what I have Python installed already. Okay, so I already have these things installed. So for anyone who is actually starting off and you don't have these things, you need to install the Python. So you go to python.org and then you can actually go ahead and then download that from there. So if you go to the Python website, they should give you the option to download like Python. Okay, so you can just go ahead and then download the latest version. All right, great. Right. So once we are done, okay, so this is actually my folder. It's okay, let's do this within this side. That would be easier. So I could just go ahead and then create a new terminal from here. Okay. And you see that I'm within the folder where my files are. Now, if I go ahead and then I type Python and then the name of the file here is the main.py, right? If I type that out, so on my phone, I would actually see a prompt within the MO application. So I just go ahead and then click accept. Now you see that here we have what? True. Okay, so this is what I was talking about here. Is request accepted, and then it gives us what? True. Mubarak, I think you should be able to see the message now. Just confirm if that's possible or if that's seen. Let's see if you can have someone else. Mubarak? Yes, okay, message received. That's good. Thank you. I'm trying someone else, I think, for Said, that'll be Said. Okay. So Said, just confirm also if you can see that the message. So Said, just confirm with us if you can also see the message. That we can proceed. Okay. Said, could you confirm if you received the message as well? I just want to make sure that we have all of us actually received that. Okay. 3149. Let me just do one last test there. And then okay. All right. So I just did a last test. Jennifer, you can confirm if you actually saw that as well. And then we could possibly move ahead. Okay. So with these ones, you notice that it just sends to an individual, right? So let's say, what if I want to send it to multiple people at the same time? So let's try something. So let's try replicating this here. Okay. And then we add an extra number. Mm, right. So I could add an extra number and then let's see. Okay, let's run this still. So don't forget, once you run that, right, it actually now sends a prompt to your phone. Okay, so since it's connected to the phone, it sends a prompt to the phone, and then you have to respond. And then you have to make sure that you are disconnected from the how do you call it? From the web interface. So the initial web interface that I showed you, you have to make sure that you are disconnected from that particular interface as well. Okay, so that's the one thing that you should take note of. Okay. All right. I think probably some of the messages, probably I sent some numbers if you're not right or something. Oh, okay, I get it. I did not save the changes, right? So it will not come true yet. I think so. Jennifer, I'm actually giving that a try again, and then just let me know. Okay, okay, give me a second. Yes, so this is like one of the errors that you receive. Okay, so at some point the airmore has to be open at all times, right? If it's not open and then you try sending the message in there, it's not going to go. All right. So Said and then Said, let me just do this. Let's see. So the reason why I did not get that is because I had not saved whatever changes that I had made. Okay, so that makes it impossible to send that. So he kept sending that to Mubarak. Okay, so I'll just go ahead. 49623. All right. Now let's see. I've not tried this with multiple lines, but we'll just see how that's going to work like. Okay. Okay. So let's give it a second. So once you do that, it actually takes a while to confirm on the phone as well to make sure that it's set. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Said, you can check if you received yours. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's for Jennifer. All right. Great, great, great. All right. So that's that. I think that should be good for us then. Um, for some reason, I think maybe the other one did not. Okay, maybe because I left the screen there. But that's just like how it works. So with that, as simple as that. But it uses your phone to actually send that, okay, across to the people. Okay. Okay, side, great, great, great feedback. Okay, so this actually works as well. Okay. But we want to go ahead and then look at, let's say, some other implementation. Okay. Now, I mentioned that Python is versatile, right? So there are different places that you could work from. So imagine that we had an Excel sheet. Let me just open this up. Um, yeah. So imagine we had an Excel sheet that had some numbers in there. So let's say I received that from some client, and then there are some numbers there. So now that becomes like the basis of what all the details or the information that I have. So I want to send out a message to them. So that means that I have to, let me just put everyone's email there. If we have some time, we may just implement, let's say, varied messages for everyone to possibly tell us what they received. Okay, but let me just put in the numbers here. Let's start. Yeah, so for the rest of us, if you want to actually get the message, right, you could just go ahead and then put your number in the chat. Okay. 49. So that once we send that out, you'd also receive that. Okay. That's if you're okay with that. It's not by force. Okay. If you're okay with that, that's fine. If not, we could just have that. Yeah. As this. Okay. Good. Great. So we have this right. And so we'll look at the second set of code. Okay. Now this is almost the same, or this is like literally the same as what we had previously. Okay. But there's one extra additional, like one extra thing that we have here. Let me just close this for now. Now, we still have the import modules. Okay. We have the one for the PyMore requests. Okay. To make sure that what we can be able to make the request. And then we have the messaging service as well. Okay. Now, aside that, we now have to be able to import for the PyExcel. Okay, so that we can work with the Python sheet or the Excel sheet that we are using now. Okay, so that's just one of the things. And then we have to make sure that what the IP address is still the same, the session is the same, this is the same, is the request accepted? That's the same. And then we go ahead and then add a second option, or let's say another option. And that option is for what? The file path. Okay. So we have this sheet that we are using. That's the test.excel file. Okay. But we have to be able to specify now based on where the file is. So let's say if I had a folder, let me see. If I had a folder, okay, within this particular place, it means that I'll have to specify that, okay, we have to add, let's say, the file path. So let's say, in relation to whichever file that we have. So let's say we have sheets, okay. If there was a sheet folder, I'll have to specify that, okay. So that's something you should know of. You have to specify that as well. And then now I have to go ahead and then add the Python, the Excel file as well. Okay. Now, if the Excel file is wrong, it means that it can't actually work with whatever we are doing. Okay. I think let's try that and then see what error would come forth. Okay. Right. So let me just run that again. Let's see. Oh, okay. Okay. So there was no validation of that. Okay. So in terms of test, if we were doing some tests, it means that we'd have to validate and then see if this is something which was done correctly. Because in the end, there was no okay, no, I actually did the wrong sorry. Right. Yeah, so I have to go with the bulk method because I expected an error, it did not give me an error. Yeah. All right. So it gave an error here, plenty errors, which you don't have to really worry about. Okay. So the totality of that is that what the file that we mentioned was not found. Okay. Um, hmm, let me try something. Let me try something here. Okay. So let me create a new folder, which is sheet. Let's see. And then let's see if that will work. So sheets dot okay, just sheet. And then let's create a copy of this there. So in terms of the path, right? So based on the relative path or absolute path, all of that will still work. Now, relative path is based on the file that you are working on. You can specify. So let's say we have two files standing at the same place. Now I know that if I move two steps, I'll get that. Now the absolute path is okay. I start from drive C, then I find out okay, it's on the desktop, it's on this folder, and all of that. So the absolute path sort of captures the whole path on the drive. The relative path references based on the location of the file. Okay, so the file in question, and then it relates with that. So I've created the sheet folder. I've added a test.sls in there, and then let's run this again and see if we'll still get the error. Okay. All right. So it actually worked. It did not give you an error. We were still able to find that. So, I mean, based on the structure of your file, you can just specify that and then you're good to go. Okay. Ooh, which one was that? Okay. So that's that. Uh, okay, I get it. All right. So that's that. And right. So let's go ahead. So aside that, when it comes to the let me just minimize it. want to be opening plenty of those. All right. So then aside that, we actually specify. Um, okay, that's good. Aside that, we also specify the column. Okay, the column in question. So we notice that from the Excel sheet here, I had that in column A, right? So let's say if I put that in column B, it means that I'll have to now specify that, okay, you have to look in column B. Okay, so based on the particular column in question, I could actually specify that. So let's say if I had column A, let's say I have the names. Okay, column C has the name. So let's say Amma, wait, let me just put any names there. Okay, don't worry. So Amma, then Davi, okay, right. My names are finished actually. All right. Um, oh no. Um, let's see, Davi. Okay, Alhaji, um, Sheko. Yeah, cool. Okay. And then when am I left with? I'm trying to circle around all of Ghana to sample the name, but it's like I'm lost somewhere. Bah. Okay. All right. So I have that done, right? So I could just specify the B for the column, right? That specifies the name. And then I could just specify so A or B, right? So in this case, if I actually pick B, it still works fine. Okay. And then we are able to work with that. Now, this here is the length of the rows. Okay, so the number of rows that I would actually be working with. Okay, so this column, that's column A, but how many rows are we picking from, or how many rows are we working with? Now, when I was working this out and I took this out, the length out, but I did not specify the length, we're not able to now pick through that because it actually now steps through that. That's another concept when it comes to Python, okay, in terms of how do you call it, loops, okay, so loops, repetitions, and like I mean all of those things. So sequence loops, and I mean there are quite a number of concepts there as well. Okay, so those are things that you could probably look at as well. All right. So what I have to specify the length because that'll be new. So you see here on 36 that I actually specify that. So within the range of that particular length, that's 6, I'm able to now specify that as well. All right, great. Mm, 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 mm. All right. So the next thing is that we now have to interact with the worksheet or the workbook. Okay, so we use that, we load this particular workbook. Now you know that the Excel file in itself is actually a workbook, right? So we load the workbook and it tells us, okay, are we the file path? Okay, the file path is actually the file name still. And then it tells us, okay, are we going to read only or we are going to write? In this case, you're not writing anything to the sheet. Maybe if you want to go a step further, we could write to the sheet that, okay, this person has received the message or that person has received the message. That's something we could do at a later time. Okay, but we're not really going to do that. Okay, it's like extra stuff. It might not be so hard. Maybe if you have some time afterwards, you could probably do that as well. Okay, but we just have to specify that we are reading just the file. So we are not writing to the file, we are just reading from it. Okay. And then we now what? Actually tell the particular sheet that we are using. So in this case, we just have one sheet here, that's sheet one. So that will be literally all that we are using. Okay, the active sheet in there. Okay, now if you look within the website for uh, the Open Excel, you can actually now find out how to interact with the various worksheets. So if you are working with worksheet one or worksheet two, you can still be able to interact with that. But in our case, we are just working with just the one worksheet. So sheet one, that's the active one, and then we are good to go. Okay. All right. So we have that. And then now we have to read the phone numbers. Okay. So we have multiple phone numbers. Let me just do something. Let me comment this out here. Right. So let's see how it reads out the numbers. So let me just turn the terminal. The terminal is this. I have to open another. Okay. So if I come back here, right, and then I run the same command, okay, let's see something. Ah, none, none, none. Okay, so for some reason, the numbers did not show. I'm not sure why. Uh, 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 uh. For some reason, the numbers did not show. Okay, I think because of the sheet that we are referring. Let's just revert the sheet and then let's see. But don't make any changes to those as well. I don't know why. Um, all right. Okay, great. This is what I wanted to see. So it picks the numbers, right, as an array. Okay. Now, an array is what? Multiple values together. Okay. Now we have different file formats, or how do you call it? Not file format. Let's say, okay, so file format and then data type. Okay, so it can be an array, it can be a string, it can be multiple things. And Python has very specific how do you call it? Data types that they use. They have dictionaries and then lots of that. But an array actually combines different data types and then it's able to put them together. Okay, so here it has the array, it has the first array, second number as an array, as part of the array, and then it has the other ones also. Okay, so all of these are what picked out for me. So that's what we do. So this here is what we do in this place. So this line 35, right? So we assign that to what? The phone numbers. And so from 36 onwards, okay, this gets very technical, but so I'm not really going to touch on that. Okay, just going to give a fair like overview of that. So what it does is that it now runs through the list of items, right? And then it picks out the cell. So the cell within the sheet, okay? And then it now goes ahead. If it's able to pick out the number, you notice that in this case, we're actually looking out for a number, okay, that's within the value. If it picks out the cell, so if it comes to, let's say, cell one, it checks if there's actually a number there. Okay, so it checks, do we have a number there? So if it is, if there's nothing there, okay, or it is not, okay, no, so if it's not equal to an empty value, or it is not none, okay, then we can now go ahead and then add that to the values that we had here. So it adds them, okay, as far as there's the value is there, then it adds that. Okay, let me do an example and then show you. So let's say for let's see here. So option 6, right? If I take that out, okay, what will happen? What will happen? So let's see what would happen. So it means that, oh, let me run that again. Did I save that? Okay, I did. Okay. No. Which cell? Okay, okay. I switched the column to B. Let me just get that. Okay. And I think I got the reason why we had the first issue. So you remember the first issue, where was that? We had one time just now when we were trying to access the sheet with the test and it wasn't working. It was because of the column, because that sheet did not add the column B to that. It's just column A that was populated. Okay, so that's the reason why. I was actually not interested in finding out why. Anyway, right. So let's run this again and see. Okay, so you see that here it shows me that what? It's none. Okay, because there's nothing there. It shows me that there's none there. And that is what we reference here. Okay, so if number is this, then we append. We append the value to that. But if not, it just adds the none in there. And you can't work with the none. Okay, so that means that you can't necessarily send a message to that particular number. Okay, so that's what this particular block of code does. Okay, now it works with two concepts. Okay, so it does with some form of repetition. Okay, for loop. Okay, it does with a for loop. So for 1 and 6, for loop is you have 6 numbers, right? So it picks on one, and then it goes to the next one. Then it goes to the next one. It keeps jumping up within those numbers. And then once it's done, right, it's done. Okay. Now you can have a loop that goes by itself continually. I mean, based on how you write that. But in this case, it just picks within the range and then it jumps from the various numbers. And the range is what? From cell A, right? So the first cell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it jumps to 6. Okay, so that's how it works like. So it just rolls through every one of them. So you notice here, it says what? +1, and then the number keeps changing, right? And then it comes back. So I +1, it can start with 1, and then it comes back +1, and then it keeps going like that. Okay, so that's just one of the things you should note. Okay. And then I think we can just comment this out for now. And then we see where the magic happens with the messages and then sending them out. Okay. Right. So we have our message here. Okay. Now, we could try something. Let me see. Could we cell? Or do you add a cell? Okay. We'll test that out. I'd want us to work with maybe this to add the name to the message that will be sent. But if we have some time, I think we'll have some time so we could check that out as well. That means after our question, okay, we'll definitely need to answer a few questions. So we'll do that. But we have our message here, right? So welcome to ADSC 2022. Thank you for joining. Right? And then we have that. And then we noticed that the numbers were actually packed together. Oh my. Huh. So the numbers were actually packed together here. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers. So this is what we have here for number in numbers. Okay, so it just picks within the number. So within this particular array that we spoke about, then we are able to work from there. So number in numbers, and then we are able to make whatever needs to be done happen. Okay, so still with the service, we call the session, and then we send the message to the number. Okay, so it sends it one by one, and then it now tells us that, okay, we've sent the message to this particular person. Okay, so it's just as simple as that. And then we are able to make that work. Okay, so for everyone who joined, that message is now sent to the person. Okay, so that's just as simple as it gets. Okay, it's not as simple as that, but that's how you actually go from there. And with that, I don't know, does anyone have any question? I think that's that for the demo. I know it's a bit, it gets a bit hard in there, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to ask. Yeah. So thank you. That brings to the end of the session. But if we have any questions, please just feel free to ask, and then we'll proceed from there. So you could raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or you could just type that out within the chat. Okay. Okay. All right. I don't suppose there is any question. So I'll just possibly stop the recording. Let me just do this here. All right. So thank you.